Wow. Well, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for your patience. We had a little technical glitch. It's so unlike Luke and I to have a technical glitch.
It's true.
So true. But welcome everybody. Happy Monday and welcome to this session of 3D+U. My name is Gigi Fusco-Mies. I am the Director of Community and Donor Relations for 3D Theatricals. And on behalf of my entire team, I want to welcome you here today and thank you for joining us during this crazy time, the stay-at-home order. If you're quarantined, or starting to get out in the world, we're still here for you, and we're looking for ways for us to gather together until we can gather again in the beautiful Cerrito Center for the Performing Arts for when we come back in Newsies next year. So I have the greatest pleasure to introduce to you somebody who I am honored and proud to call one of my dearest friends, who is an award-winning actor, director, and just the most gorgeous tall blonde you've ever seen in your life. He's going to tell you some great stories about growing up with the best of Hollywood stars. Luke, Yankee, take it away, my dear.
Thank you. Again, my apologies that we had some technical difficulties. You know, it never fails. You test everything, you're ready to go, and then your computer says, you need an update. So just at that crucial moment, it never fails. But we're here now, happy to be here. Some of you who have seen my other presentations, I see some familiar faces there, of course. And as I think most of you know, my mother was an actress named Eileen Heckert, who won an Academy Award for the film Butterflies Are Free and is in the Theater Hall of Fame. And I wrote a book about her that has done very well. Gigi, I didn't have the book. I have all my other props, but I didn't have the book.
See, you have to be a Luke Yankee groupie like me. Just outside the spotlight, this beautiful.
But I do have this prop because she also, wait a minute now, I got to hold it right.
There you go. Put it in front of you. Put Oscar right in front of you.
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
So she did win one of these little guys for a film called Butterflies Are Free in 1973. And for those of you who might not, I think most of you are familiar with my mother and her work, but before I get into some wonderful Diva stories, I have a little 2.5-minute video retrospective I wanted to share with you, maybe just to give you some of a refresher or to show you some of the highlights. And this, it ends with the clip of her winning the Academy Award, which then kind of segues into some fabulous stories I have about the Oscars and about that fateful night in my life and in hers. So let me just do a little screen share here, and hopefully this will all go smoothly. Okay. All righty, bear with me one sec here. Of course, I had this all set up and good to go before. Okay, bear with. We will get to, here we go. Okay, let me get this back to the beginning. And we'll do full screen here, and here we go. This is about 2.5 minutes, as I said.
Hi. Oh, hey. Hey, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
How old are you?
21, and you?
None of your business. That is real gone to hell smoking.
Just say some cute little joke. Like, hello, mister, buy me a drink. I'm so dry, I'm spitting cotton.
You're a sly one because of the school. You don't want the school to get a bad name. But you know more than you're telling, Miss Butter Wouldn't Melt Fern.
Leave me to the Indians. What does it matter? I'm dead already. My child just killed me.
So take a good look at yourself, a skeleton without a closet.
Oh, Aunt Lou!
Mary, you should be a writer. You have a way with words.
Her name is Dr. Leslie Rosen. We're working on my self-esteem. Roach, honey, please, you've got to go.
You are married. You have a daughter. You're very happy. You don't need self-esteem.
I know. Snow White. Remember when the witch brought her the poisoned apple? I'm sorry. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. I know you're not a witch.
Of course not. And I know you're not Snow White.
The ladies nominated for the best performance by an actress in a supporting role are Jeannie Berlin in The Heartbreak Kid,
Eileen Heckert in Butterflies Are Free,
Geraldine Page in Pete and Tilly,
Susan Terrell in Fat City,
Shelley Winters in The Poseidon Adventure. And the winner is...
The winner is Eileen Heckert in Butterflies Are Free.
I would like to thank the very first man who ever recommended me for this part, Howard Otway, and a darling crew, and of course you. Thank you.
Okay, so let me dive right in. She always cries when she sees that. Let me dive right in by giving you all a little dish on the Academy Awards. When Robert Duvall laughed that way over Shelley Winters, the appearance was that his laughter was saying, isn't it funny that Shelley Winters won for the Poseidon Adventure? Well, in fact, everyone expected Shelley Winters to win for the Poseidon Adventure. And for Jimmy the Greek, who was the biggest odds maker in Las Vegas at the time, my mother was his only upset of the entire evening. Now, I'm sure most of you know that they generally seat the winners on the aisle or pretty close to the aisle. Did you notice how many people my mother had to crawl over to get up to the stage? I mean, clearly they did not expect her to win. So what had actually happened with Robert Duvall is when he came out on stage, he locked eyes in the audience with James Caan, who was his drinking buddy from The Godfather, which they had shot the year before. Well, they had many private jokes together on the set. So just as Robert Duvall was announcing Shelley Winters' name, James Caan in the audience made some obscene gesture. I don't know what it was, but it was one of their private jokes on the set. And Robert Duvall saw it and totally lost it on live television broadcast around the world. Needless to say, Miss Winters was not pleased. He called her the next day and apologized, but the damage was already done. Now, when the nominations came out, my mother had this wonderful Hollywood agent at the time named Ina Bernstein. And Ina called her and said, Eileen, my darling, have you seen Shelley Winters' performance in the Poseidon Adventure? Do you know what you're up against? She said, well, no, Ina, I'm afraid I don't. Oh, honey, 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 get yourself a big bag of pop and go. Towards the end of the picture, she does an underwater ballet in her bloomers for 20 minutes, during which time she saves Gene Hackman's life. She then surfaces, belches ever so slightly, grabs her left tit and dies. Now, my darling, how can you possibly compete with that? All you do is act in your picture. But regardless of that, everybody expected Shelley Winters to win. So that night, when my father was the gentleman sitting next to her who grabbed her and kissed her when she won. Jack Yankee was an incredible man. As a matter of fact, on August 1st, 2 days ago, he would have been 100 years old. And boy, he was just an amazing man. I absolutely adored him. And so when he was so excited when they called her name, he grabbed her face and kissed her with such force that as she went up to the stage, he looked down and saw that he had a big piece of skin under his thumbnail. And he thought, oh dear God, what have I done? But he forgot about it in the heat of the moment. Well, if you look closely at some of the publicity pictures with Cloris Leachman and my mom backstage, you'll see a long trail of blood going down my mother's neck where my father gouged her as he gave her her congratulatory kiss. And she was very fond of saying, honey, I was the first bloody Academy Award winner in history. So just a little more about the Oscars. They went on to the Governor's Ball. And every star in Hollywood was there that night. It was just as you might imagine. And so at one point, my father said, oh, honey, I know this is your night, but there's only one person here I want to meet, and she's coming down the stairs right now. And there, coming down the stairs, being practically carried by two beefy-looking boys, was none other than Mae West. And my mother told me later on, she looked like she was held together with about 5 pairs of eyelashes. And she said, honey, at this point in her life, she looked like she was good for about an hour a day, and this was her hour. So they went over and made the introductions, and Mae West was like, you know, all cinched in and really like glued together. She's like, oh, Miss Hackett, congratulations on your award. And then she looks my father up and down and says, but it looks to me like you already had the prize. My father nearly wet himself. He was so excited. And one other sweet story about the Oscars about that night is that it was the same year they had given the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award to Rosalind Russell. And as much as my mother respected Rosalind Russell as an actress, she was always kind of jealous of her, because the role that had put my mother on the map on stage was in William Inge's Picnic. And this role in the film was played by Rosalind Russell. My mother didn't have that kind of clout in Hollywood at that time. And her husband, Rosalind Russell's husband, was the producer, and he had sort of bought the property for her. So much as my mother admired Rosalind Russell, she'd always been sort of rankled that she didn't get to play her great stage role on film. So, and this was shortly before Rosalind Russell died. She was in a wheelchair, and her face was all bloated from the cortisone injections due to her crippling arthritis. And my mother goes up to this very fragile lady, and she says, Roz, congratulations, it's Hacky. And Rosalind Russell takes my mother's face in her hands, and she says, oh, if I'd let you play your Picnic, you'd have had your Oscar 20 years ago. And of course, my mother burst into tears the same way Gigi is right now. So when they got back to the hotel, there was a huge stack of messages and telegrams. This was in the days when people still sent telegrams. And the one on the top simply said, call Marlena. Regardless of the hour, call Marlena, with a phone number in Paris. And so my mother turned to my father and said, Jack, won't this be thrilling? My very first phone call 2 hours after winning the Oscar will be from Marlena Dietrich. So Mom dials the overseas operator, as one did in those days, and she hears that voice say, hello. And Mom says, hello, Marlena, it's Eileen. Darling, your makeup looked terrible. She said, it did? But she said, but darling, it did in the movie too. And Marlena Dietrich spent the next 10 minutes berating my mother for her lack of style, her lack of fashion. But in her staunch Germanic way, that was the only way Marlena Dietrich could congratulate her. I have a lot of other stories about Dietrich, but we can go there. We can go somewhere else, Gigi. Where do you want to go?
I wouldn't mind another Marlena story, but I want to just say, in the history of Oscar speeches, your mom's is so beautiful. It's just short and sweet, and she didn't have to get played off like they do now. She just looked, when she touched her face, it was like a little girl. Like she was just, couldn't believe it.
That's very interesting, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Gigi, because I am a big proponent of the power of positive thinking. And one of the things that my mother told me is that from the time she was a little girl, anytime she couldn't sleep, she would visualize winning the Academy Award. And so then, and of course, as I said before, everyone expected Shelley Winters to win. And just before, and that the Best Supporting Actress category was very early, as it often is. It was one of the very first awards that night. And so just before that, Diane Carroll was singing one of the nominated songs. And my mother suddenly took her glasses off and tossed them into my father's lap. And he knows that she can't see when she's blind as a bat without them. And so he's like, what are you doing? And she said, I'll tell you later. And she had this sense of knowing, this almost sixth sense that just came over her. And this voice in her head just said, it's mine. And she looked at the back of Shelley Winters' head, who was sitting ahead of her, on the aisle, I might add. And she just said in her head, sorry, Shelley, it's not yours this time. I'm winning tonight. And so that's why she was kind of cool as a cucumber when she got up there, but there is that moment where she kind of puts her head, it's like, oh my God, I really did it. So all of those years of visualizing it and creating it, you know, all of those years of manifestation paid off for her.
You can,
and I just loved it.
You
when
can feel that in that moment too. You know, I've been lucky enough to have seen it a few times, and each time I'm just so taken by that moment. She did it.
Yeah.
And it was all hers. And that moment was just so dear. And the fact that, you know, that she just spoke so eloquently and thanked him and walked off,
well,
even with blood dripping down her neck.
Exactly.
Now that's one heck of a gal, right? You know, I really would love to have one more Marlena story, because we're not going to, you know, what's unfortunate is we're not going to, in the next few years, probably not hear many more of these.
This is true. My friend Benjamin is quite an authority on Marlene Dietrich, and he is zooming in here all the way from Germany. And so Benjamin knows a lot about Marlene. And so I told the story about what happened that night at the Oscars. And Marlene Dietrich could be so rough on people. And so as a result of that, she didn't have a lot of friends. And she admired great talent. And she would sort of glom onto people if she felt someone was talented, and sort of make them her best friend for a certain period of time. She did the same thing to the wonderful British actor Brian Murray when he was doing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead on Broadway, which is a thing that majorly put him on the map. And she did that to my mother when my mother was doing a play on Broadway called The Dark at the Top of the Stairs in, I believe this was about 1954, 56, somewhere around in there. And Marlene came to see the show 4 or 5 times, and she would always come backstage and ask my mother to go to supper. And Mom would say, Miss Dietrich, I'm flattered and I'm honored that you want to take me to supper, but I have a husband and 2 small children at home, and if I don't catch the 11:07, there's not another train until the milk train at 3 a.m. So believe me, Marlene Dietrich did not like being turned down for supper invitations. So finally, a few months later, she came back to the theater and said, my darling, now that your play is about to close, I am going to be doing my nightclub act in Las Vegas. You will come and join me for the weekend. Now, this wasn't a request, this was a command. So my mother made the necessary arrangements and got her tickets to Vegas. And when she arrived at the hotel, that I believe it was the Sands Hotel, the concierge said, oh yes, Miss Heckert, Miss Dietrich is expecting you. She's down in the theater. So Mom dropped her bags off in the room and went down to the theater and opened the door very quietly, not wanting to interrupt Marlene's rehearsal. And she didn't hear anything. And so she walks up the aisle, still nothing. Finally, when her eyes adjusted to the dim work light, she sees a scrub woman on the stage with a bucket and a brush who's scrubbing the stage. And she says, excuse me, I'm looking for Miss Dietrich. And she wheels around and says, hello, darling, how was your trip? And Marlene Dietrich is on her hands and knees scrubbing the stage. And Mom said, Marlene, what are you doing? Surely they have people here to clean the theater. She said, oh, these stupid people never get this floor clean enough for me. I'm going to drag a $50,000 ermine around this stage tonight, and it's got to be spotless. So I could go on with Marlene's stories, but
that's, well, you know, I could see her point. If I was dragging around a $50,000 ermine, I'd want those floors cleaned too.
Well,
though I don't know that I'd be cleaning it myself, by the way.
Well, and the fascinating part is that she led people to believe it was ermine. It was actually, and some of you have seen the picture of her in that amazing, you know, white, it looks like an ermine that down to the floor. It was actually made out of swan's down from male swan. And imagine how many swans gave their lives for Marlene's coat. I mean, that was one hell of a coat.
Wow. Well, those were the days, right? I mean, wow.
But actually, one other brief Marlene story. I have several.
Please.
But just one other brief one. About a few years after that, she was doing her farewell tour, one of her many farewell tours of her one-woman show at the Candlewood Theater in Connecticut, near where we grew up. And so Mom thought, well, this might be one of my last chances to see her. So she got tickets for the whole family. And it was an incredible show. And so afterwards we went backstage, and of course they had the velvet ropes at the stage door. And Mom said, now listen, She is very temperamental. I don't know if she will even see me, let alone see you, but I'll see what I can do. So she goes backstage and they open the velvet ropes, you know, for Mom. And Marlena was terribly warm with her. And at one point she said, how did you happen to come tonight? And she said, well, I came with my family. She said, well, would they like to come backstage? So she turns to some dresser walking by with a wig stand and says, get Eileen Heckert's family. Well, Misty, we'll find them. So he comes running out, this poor little terrified man goes, oh my God, where's Eileen Heckert's family? So we went running backstage and Marlena held my hand the entire time. I think I was 15. And she was wearing so much perfume that for 3 days afterwards, I smelled like Marlena Dietrich. So I would get the hall pass in grade school and go into the boys' room and go, so I could smell Marlena Dietrich. In fact, I called that chapter in my book, Smelling Marlena Dietrich.
It's a good chapter. Every chapter is good in that book, that's for sure. Oh, Luke, wow. I mean, I know we've got so much to go over, but what is this like to be the keeper of these stories for all these years? I mean, it's an incredible life. It's incredible that you've had these experiences.
It's interesting the way it's evolved because, you know, my mother, I knew that she would never write these stories down. And she didn't want me to write a book because she didn't think a book would sell unless it was salacious. And so, you know, she was really adamant against me not writing a book. And I thought, so I'm going to prove her wrong from the other side and let her know there's a way to write a book and not have it be salacious. And, you know, it's a very loving tribute, but, pardon me, that, and the book has been out here for a while now. And there's a big section, which I talked about last time. Thank you, darling. There's a big chapter on.
It's still available online, I believe, is it not? Amazon?
Yes, it's available on Amazon, and it's available as a download and Kindle for your Kindle, and paperback edition just came out about 2 years ago with a lot of new material. But pardon me. So there was as I said, there was a big section on Marilyn Monroe, and as you saw in that clip, my mother played Marilyn's best friend in the film A Bus Stop. And to the day my mother died, she could never talk about Marilyn Monroe without bursting into tears. And I knew there was a lot there. And I never had an opportunity, you know, she would tell these stories at parties and all, and I knew all the stories by heart, but I knew there was something deeper behind these stories. And I was determined to try and figure out what it was. So I spent most of last summer listening to audiobooks about Marilyn. And needless to say, there are many of them. And my friend Alicia Soper, who was here in the audience, who we're going to talk a little bit more about shortly, told me what some of the best ones were. And so I started listening to these audiobooks and realized what the similarities were and why my mother always burst into tears. And basically, both of these women were adopted. They were from broken homes. They never, as much as they both achieved, they never really believed that they were loved or wanted or that they were truly part of the club. So not only did this affect my mother and her deep bond with Marilyn for that period of time, but it also affected some of her abilities, some of the ways in which she practiced mothering. So I wrote a play about this called Marilyn, Mom and Me. And it's about my mother's relationship with Marilyn and ultimately how it impacted me. And it was starting to win, Gigi saw a couple of different readings of it. And it was starting to get a lot of attention and really build some momentum when the world turned upside down. And so a couple of months ago, back in May, I believe it was, we did a Zoom presentation. And two of these amazing actresses who were in the Zoom presentation, Alicia Soper, who plays Marilyn, and Laura Gardner, who plays Eileen, are with us today. Thrilled to have them here. So I'm going to show a little 2.5-minute clip from the Zoom presentation. So this is, you all know about the limitations of Zoom, but even so, the brilliant performances of these ladies and the power of this still comes through. So let's look at this little clip from Marilyn, Mom and Me. Again, this is about 2.5 minutes. And then maybe these ladies can share a word or two about playing these illustrious ladies. So let me go back to screen sharing here. And let's see, I need to go to my desktop here. Bear with me one moment here. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'll go back to the beginning here.
Now, while you do that, Luke, I'll just tell everybody, you know, I've been lucky enough to, I've seen 2 staged readings of Marilyn, Mom and Me. Oh my goodness. It's such an interesting insight. Not only, it's a part of Marilyn Monroe. Quite frankly, I was so surprised to see. She was a smart cookie. She knew what was up and how to play that game, right, Luke?
Yes. So let's look at the clip and then we can talk about it a bit.
Great.
Josh call you Hacky?
So Luke, we can't see it.
Okay.
We hear it.
I wonder why. Let's try again.
Right down at the bottom, it should be a green screen, share screen button. You hit that, and then it should go into your.
Okay, let me try again here. I thought,
Okay.
oh, I didn't have the screen. I thought I had screen sharing. Share.
Yeah,
okay.
So down at the share screen. There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's start again. All right, go back to full screen, and here we go.
Thank you.
Can I ask you something? Why does Josh call you Hacky?
It's a nickname I've had since high school.
And do you like being called that?
Nobody's ever asked me that. It's just a name that kind of stuck.
But do you like it?
I hate it. I've always hated it.
Sounds like someone who works in a deli on 2nd Avenue. Or one of Arthur's cousins. Eileen is such a pretty name. It means brightness or light. It's a derivative of Helen. Like Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships.
I think that's more your department than mine, honey.
I know just how you feel about names that stick. In high school, a boy called me the girl. And that was when I was still Norma Jean, you know, long before my initials were MM. I thought it made me sound cheap. But all the boys started calling me the girl, and well, there was nothing I could do about it. I was going to ask you if I could call you Hacky too, but see, now I wouldn't dream of it. Oh, I have a present for you.
For me?
Well, isn't your birthday coming up in a few days? I know it's not polite to talk about a girl's age, but since we share secrets, I know you're going to be 37. Happy birthday.
Marilyn reaches into her purse and pulls out a small gift-wrapped box.
That's very sweet, but you didn't have to. Oh my God,
It's the pearl and sapphire earrings, just like the ones that I was wearing at the reading. Well, I know you admired them. So I called Cartier and I ordered you a pair.
Marilyn, this is far too extravagant. I can't accept this.
Oh, please. No, it would break my heart if you didn't. I mean, after all, now that we're best friends, let me put them on for you.
Marilyn puts them on Eileen and holds her face tenderly.
They're beautiful, just like you. Happy birthday, Eileen.
Wow,
I know
what
the volume was
incredible.
a little light. I hope you heard that all right.
We did. You know, ladies, would you like to unmute yourself so we can ask you what this experience was like? That was an amazing scene, even powerful on Zoom. Goes to show great writing and great performances, great acting. Laura, you got to play Eileen Heckert. What was that like?
Well, I've always been a fan of Eileen's, and strangely enough, she studied where I studied at HB Studio, and she worked with Uta Hagen, who is one of my teachers. So to have met Luke, and then for him to ask me to play his mother was an extraordinary honor. And I would say it's now, oh my God, it's a year since Luke and I met, and a year since we started the journey. It's been an extraordinary, the journey of being able to what I've been able to do with my work, and to bring myself and my work as an actor, and to explore it with Alicia and Brian Rohan, who played Luke, and to work with Luke, and to the magic of being able to recreate and to create the parts of Eileen, who I identified with. It's just been extraordinary. And I left New York in 91, and my home is New York, and my work feels as though it is still in New York and in the theater, although I also do film and TV. So the honor of being able to bring myself to Eileen, and the magic of being able to bring her alive again, it's been an extraordinary journey, and the emotional roller coaster of what her life experience was at that time with Marilyn was truly, and for the play to go back and forth in time. And we were very lucky, the Zoom experience, for us to go from the life experience in New York and in living rooms, and then even the magic of the Zoom production was really quite extraordinary, because even though this Zoom thing doesn't really matter, because I think the love of the piece and of those two women and the communication between Eileen and Luke, that what we were able to achieve, I think, was quite extraordinary.
And if I may just add, needless to say, very difficult to find somebody to play my mother, especially for me. And so I was at a theater conference with one of my other plays, the Last Frontier Theater Conference up in Alaska, and Laura has been a part of that conference for many years. And I saw her do a staged reading of another play, and I was like, she's got she could play my mom. She's like the only actress I could think of, practically, who could play my mom. And so I talked to her about it, and I hadn't even written the script yet. So I came back, and the thing that was so amazing is that through the various incarnations, Laura was constantly, send me this video, send me that Playhouse 90 she did, send me her episode of To Tell the Truth. She did so much research. I mean, she's probably seen as many of Mom's films and TV appearances on video at this point as I have, which is saying something.
Right.
She really did her homework. She's extraordinary in the role.
Laura, I'd just love to ask you, because it's such a personal work. I mean, here are two, an icon of an Oscar-winning actress, with an iconic movie, but such a personal story. Was there anything that you found about the relationship between Eileen and Marilyn that came as a complete surprise to you?
The older I've gotten, the more I realize that we're all the same. To know that no matter how this was an Oscar-winning Broadway star, but the level of vulnerability is the same. We're all human, and so I think that the older I've gotten, the more I recognize that it's really easy to, in our low self-esteem and our ego, that the older I get, the more I recognize that we're all the same. So no.
Got it. What about our Marilyn? Alicia, where are you? I'm looking for you.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Hi, sweetie. Wow.
She looks so very different, doesn't she? With this long red hair and.
what about you? Tell me your experience with this piece, and dealing with it not only just about Marilyn, who you know Marilyn so well, but this part of her life, this relationship with Eileen, and also to be part of this personal relationship with Luke and his mother and Marilyn. What's the experience been like for you?
I mean, it's been pretty much a dream, honestly, because I've played Marilyn at Universal Studios I'm just hit my 7th year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a big party by staying at home. So I've had quite a long journey at this point with Marilyn, but I've loved her my whole life. And in like 5th grade, I don't know how I got the idea, but I checked out books from the library about Marilyn, and I had a Marilyn themed birthday party and assigned people characters from her life, and had my friends, dress up as Joe DiMaggio, and and I kind of forgot about that. But so Marilyn has kind of been in the periphery of my life, or kind of the center stage for a while. And to get to play her and represent her humanity, and who she was as an artist and actress and human being are aspects of her that I feel like are so frequently dismissed, and to get to be a part of sharing that part of her humanity has been really, truly a dream. And to get to explore her relationship with Eileen through Laura, and just, it's, as an actor, there's not much more I could ask for. And Luke's words bringing their relationship and the connection to life is, about a year ago, actually, I had a friend of mine had interviewed me for a magazine that he was starting, and asked me what my dream project was. And I kind of said this time in Marilyn's life to get to play her as a producer and as an artist and a full human being is my absolute dream to be able to do while I can still pull it off.
Well, and she's absolutely extraordinary in the role. And the Brian Rohan, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, the actor who plays me.
He's here, he's just not on video.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. Great. Okay, wonderful. Brian, are you on audio? Can you anything you want to say?
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I apologize if you don't mind if I could bring this to the table. I tested positive for COVID 3 weeks ago. I'm all clear. I'm all clear. But I look like the Unabomber. Oh. So I am staying, I'm staying off camera. I had texted Luke to quote Joan Crawford, "I don't leave the house unless I look like Joan Crawford." So.
Oh, well, we're happy to hear that you're doing well, Brian, and we'll take your voice anytime.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate being part of this. So, yeah.
Brian, did you want to say anything about, playing the playwright and director?
Was that challenging? Well, it's first of all, there is a weight to that. The honor of being asked by somebody to portray them is enormous. And then the pressure to bring, the goods to the table is equally enormous. I've never felt so much pressure to get it right. And it's not because, Luke was not turning the screws in any sort of medieval way. But it was just the fact that I really there's so much love in this story, and I wanted to do it justice, and yes. So, and Luke
you do.
Luke, well, thank you. Luke has been so supportive, when I wanted to try things, when, there's also certain gestures, certain ways of saying things that, you also have to bring to the table when you're portraying any biographical character. And Luke has been very supportive of those things. So yeah.
Well, thanks, Brian, for that. That's wonderful.
COVID to get over with, so we can do a full production of this. It's won some awards at some New Works festivals, but I'm just ready to move forward with it, and I know these amazing actors are as well.
Yes, you guys are fantastic, and I look forward to the day that everybody can see you live on stage and to tell this story. It's fantastic, and thank you for sharing with us today. It's so wonderful of you.
Absolutely.
I know working with Lucas was a perfect experience, so we don't even have to go on with that. Well,
before we wrap up Marilyn Mom and Me, the one last thing I want to say is Benjamin, our friend from Germany, who I mentioned earlier, is actually the president of the German chapter of the Marilyn Monroe fan club, which is how we met. And he has a wonderful magazine that comes out like every other month, Benjamin, more or less. Is that right? I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, can you unmute yourself, Benjamin? Do you need to unmute him, Gigi?
Oh, do I?
Maybe.
Ugh. There we go.
I'm a host too. I can unmute you.
I think all of us are hitting a button at the same time, which is so fun with Zoom. So,
really? Well, anyway, Brian, what I was going to say is that Benjamin has done an article on Marilyn Mom and Me, which will be out in the next edition of the German Marilyn Remembered magazine, which we're all very excited about.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's very exciting. Very exciting indeed. Very exciting. Well, how do you want, now, do you want to give us is there another little Marilyn story we can then transition into some other great stories of yours?
Another Marilyn story. I told a bunch of them last time. I'm trying to think of a short one that might be good. Alicia, Laura, can you think of a good short Marilyn story? Why am I not thinking of any at the moment?
You know, probably when it comes to Marilyn, nothing short. But what a great experience. And I know last time when we met, you were telling stories how Marilyn would throw the fruit down to your brothers.
Yes, yes.
Downstairs. And your mom had to go out in the middle of the night to pick them all up.
I'll share that, and those of you who did, you can enjoy it again. So when they were shooting on location in Phoenix, Marilyn had the top floor suite at the hotel, and my mother and my brothers, who were little boys, had the suite one floor below. And Marilyn was constantly being sent these elaborate gift baskets by studio types who were trying to curry favor with the biggest star in the world at the time. And so Marilyn would take the grapefruits and the oranges out of these gift baskets, and she would go out on the balcony and she would call down to my brothers and she would say, "Mark, Philip, do you want to play catch?" And she would throw the grapefruits and oranges down to my brothers on the balcony below. But of course, at ages 2 and 4, they couldn't catch anything. So my mother would say, "Oh, for God's sake, Marilyn's out on the balcony playing catch with your brothers again. Guess who's going to have a raggedy ass down at the pool at 2 a.m. picking up all those bloody grapefruits and oranges?"
Well, you know, listen, I betcha being the son of a famous actress, that probably provided some opportunities for you to maybe meet some of your childhood heroes. I don't know, maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the ones that, one of my favorite stories is that the first musical I saw on Broadway was I saw Ethel Merman in Hello, Dolly. And I think I was like 10. And I mean, it was just wonderful. And of course, I mean, I just thought it was the most amazing thing. I mean, and of course I had house seats through a friend, so I was way down front. And about a month later, this was in the fall, about a month or two later, my mother had this wonderful Broadway agent named Milton Goldman at the time. And she had a big Christmas party every year. And there was a certain point in time where you kind of knew you had arrived if you were invited to Eileen Heckard's tree trimming party up in Connecticut. So she said to me, Milton Goldman, her agent, she said, "Milton is bringing a special guest to the Christmas party this year. And I think you're going to be quite pleased when you find out who it is." And without missing a beat, I said, "Is it Ethel Merman?" And sure enough, Milton brought Ethel Merman to the party. Well, this was all I could talk about. And I have to tell you, at age 10, that kind of news doesn't go down too big on the playground. I mean, kids would say to me, who's coming to your parents' party? Ethel Mertz? I'd say, well, she's coming too, and her name is really Vivian Vance, but this is Ethel Merman. She's a big musical comedy, so well, they didn't care and they didn't want to care. But around the house, it was all I could talk about. Until my mother said, now listen, you mustn't gush over Miss Merman. Big stars don't like that. You may tell her how much you enjoyed her performance in Hello, Dolly once, but that's it. So the night before the party, I was so excited I could hardly sleep. And that morning, I was just so nervous, I could hardly even button the buttons on my little Christmas vest. So when she arrived, I went up to her and I said, how do you do, Miss Merman? It's such a pleasure to meet you. I really enjoyed your performance in Hello, Dolly, and my mother would like to know if I could fix you a drink. And she was very sweet with kids, and she was sort of charmed, and she said, sure, kid, I'll have a martini. And I said, well, Miss Merman, I'm only 10 years old. I'm afraid I don't know how to make a martini. She said, come on, I'll show you. So Ethel Merman led me over to the bar and showed me exactly how to make her variety of martini, which was stirred and not shaken. And here I am at age 10, I could barely see over the bar, and I'm holding this big half-gallon of Tanqueray gin, and my palms were so sweaty, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm gonna drop this on Ethel Merman's foot, and she's gonna be out of Hello, Dolly for the rest of the run. It's going to be all my fault. Well, of course, that didn't happen. So I fixed the martini according to her specifications with 2 olives, and she took a sip, and she said, that's pretty good, kid. Tell you what, Luke, you can be my personal bartender all night long. So for the rest of the party, whenever anyone would say, Merm, can I freshen your drink? She would say, no, thank you. Luke's taking care of me. So as the party wore on, I went up to my mom and I wanted to ask her a question about my new best friend, Ethel Merman. And I said, Mom, do you think it would be okay if I invited Miss Merman up to my room to see my puppet collection? I was very into puppets and marionettes at the time. Boy, between the puppets, the marionettes, and the love of musical theater, if they didn't suspect something by then, they were never going to. But that's another story.
Another story.
So Mom was very sweet. She said, now, my darling, you may ask Miss Merman, but you have to understand that she's a very important lady, and a lot of people at the party want to talk to her. So you mustn't get your feelings hurt if she says no. So I waited for the appropriate moment. I think Miss Merman was just leaving the loo. And I went up to her and I said, excuse me, Miss Merman, if it's not too much trouble, do you think you could come up to my room and see my puppet collection? And she said, well, maybe. And I immediately got it. I said, oh, it's all right. I know you're a very important person. A lot of people here want to talk to you. You don't have to. I understand. So I went away with my tail between my legs, but I got over it pretty quickly, the way kids do. And about 20 minutes later, Milton Goldman came in and he said, Merm, come on, get your coat. Limo's going to be here any minute. And she looked around and she said, wait a minute, Milton. I got to go upstairs and see Luke's puppets. God love her. She came up to my room and I gave her the nickel tour as opposed to the dollar tour. I only showed her the out of all 35. And a week later, she sent me a lovely Christmas card with a note saying, thank you for taking such good care of me at your parents' party. Merry Christmas and love, Ethel Merman. And she will forever have a tender place in my heart. And I still know how to make a fabulous martini.
Yes, you do, darling. Well, you know, did you have any trips with your mom to, let's say, like Sardi's or anything? Any one of those iconic places back in the day where you may have met somebody?
Me because she has produced Diva Dish so many times. She knows these stories almost as well as I do. So when I was a kid, like a little kid, one of the things my mother would do, especially when she was doing a show, is that she would go around to all of the department stores in Manhattan, because we lived about an hour outside of Manhattan in Connecticut. And she would go around to all of the department stores a few weeks before Christmas, and she would sort of scope out the Santa Clauses and see which one had the best routine that year so she knew where to take me. Well, this particular year, she decided it was Macy's. And so she got me all dressed up and took me in on the train, and we waited in line. And as I got up to the front of the line, Santa, who of course was an unemployed actor, recognized my mother and he said, my God, Hacky, how are you? It's been years. And Mom thought, I am going to kill this son of a bitch. He's just ruined Christmas for my child. He's going to be scarred for life. But I took it another way. See, I knew that only Mommy's really close friends called her Hacky. And if Santa knew Mommy well enough to call her Hacky, I was getting everything on my list that year. So then she took me to Sardi's, as Gigi mentioned, the famous theatrical restaurant. And Vincent Sardi, who was a huge fan of my mom's, he brought me my ginger ale in a champagne bucket with a swizzle stick. And oh God, I just felt like such a grown-up. He took a caricature off the wall and showed it to me up close. And then as we were having dinner, all of a sudden, Soupy Sales blew a kiss to my mother from across the restaurant. Well, Soupy Sales kids show was like the hottest thing on the air. And I thought Soupy Sales was it. And I said, Mommy, do you know Soupy Sales? She said, well, darling, as a matter of fact, I do. Would I like to meet him? So she beckoned Soupy over to the table and I shook his hand and he paid his respects. And afterwards, I said, now, Mommy, you tell me the truth. Did my older brothers ever meet anybody as important as Soupy Sales? And she's thinking Debbie Reynolds, Marlena Dietrich, Betty Davis. And she looked me right in the eye and said, no, my darling, they never met anybody that important. And that was the first day I knew my mother was somebody. She knew Santa and Soupy Sales. I mean, to have met them both on the same day, I could have died happy at age 7.
Oh, that's the greatest. That's the greatest. I love that. I mean, it's more than Santa Claus, more
Absolutely.
than anybody else, right? Soupy Sales, yeah, back in the day, right?
Yes,
you know, Luke has been, first of all, he's an amazing person and friend to me. And I was producing a fundraiser for a group in Anaheim. And my star for the evening was Miss Debbie Reynolds herself. And Debbie, it was one of the last public appearances. In fact, she made that announcement that night that it was going to be her last public appearance, aside from a gig that she was going to do in Vegas with her kids, like a week or two later. So it was really our last chance to see her in that way. And I'm like, you know, with all the things that go on in an event like that, so many different people, I need somebody who's going to be able to sit with Debbie Reynolds and make her feel comfortable and cater to her. Who does one call?
And so I was the Debbie Diva Wrangler.
You were the Debbie Diva Wrangler, and I chose wisely because, well, of course, Debbie knew Hacky. So
exactly.
There you go. What did you have any Debbie stories you could share with us, Luke?
I have the prop too. You'll be happy to know.
Oh, good.
Back in the early '60s, my mother did one of those silly screwball comedies with Debbie Reynolds, and it was a film called My Six Loves. And Mom and Debbie got quite close, and it was directed by Gower Champion, who directed Hello, Dolly on Broadway and 42nd Street, and it was one of the few films that Gower Champion directed. But, pardon me, so Debbie was having a wrap party as they were completing shooting for the entire cast, and so she asked and help her with place cards and who should sit next to whom and all that sort of thing. And so Mom goes to this amazing mansion in Bel Air, and the butler greets her at the door, and there's this elaborate marble table is set with Wedgwood china and Lely crystal and beautiful silverware, and at each place with all of the fine china there was one of these. Now this is a little glass cluster of grapes, got a little cap on it, which you may or may not be able to see. And at the time, these were made in Taiwan very inexpensively. And what you would do is you would put these at each person's place setting, and you would fill it with red wine or white wine or grape juice if they were in the program, and they could use it to refill their own wine glass. So my mother bought these things by the dozens. And so she's looking at Debbie's elegant table with all the china and the fine crystal, and she sees the little grape wine bottles, and Mom says, oh, Debbie, aren't those things heaven? I get them at the Pottery Barn in Connecticut for 69 cents a piece. How much do you have to pay for them out here on the West Coast? And Debbie Reynolds glared at her and saying, I am telling everyone at the party I had them flown in from Switzerland. And Heckard, if you say a word, I'll strangle you. So that night at the party, nobody says a word about the Lalique, the fine china. All they commented on were the little 69-cent wine bottles. And so at one point, Gower Champion said, "Oh, Debbie, those things are fabulous. Where did you get those?" She said, "Oh, thank you. I had them flown in from Switzerland." "Right, Heckert?" "Oh, yeah, Switzerland. Oh, yeah, a glass blower. Yeah, in Switzerland. Yes, absolutely. Just outside of Lucerne. Yeah."
Oh my gosh, I can just see that happening too. Just the glare.
To mess with Debbie, absolutely.
You know, and I'm sorry, but before we move on, I just want to say, you know, unfortunately, a couple of years later, we lost both Carrie and Debbie.
Yeah.
And you know, Debbie, when we saw her, Luke, that night, she was pretty frail. You know,
but boy, you didn't know it on stage.
No, as soon as she saw her public, she was on it, and almost we had to cut her off because she was having such a good time performing. But she was definitely something else. And if you haven't seen it, I think, you know, HBO had a documentary about Carrie and Debbie.
It's wonderful.
And you know, it shows her at home being very, you know, not feeling real well. And it was that time, it was Carrie saying, "I don't know about this deal that you're going to do. I want to know, are you too tired?" I think she was referring to my event. I was heartbroken because it was right before the Vegas trip. So, but she was a trooper. And as soon as she saw her public, she was on it. That is old school Hollywood at its best, right, Luke?
Yeah, totally. She was amazing. She was amazing. Yeah, that was an incredible evening.
I'm sure you have some more old world Hollywood stories we can go through in the rest of our time.
A couple of wonderful stories about Katharine Hepburn. First of all, when Katharine Hepburn came to see my mother in The Bad Seed, which was in that clip where she was playing the alcoholic, was kind of one of my mother's signature roles, and she was nominated for an Oscar for that and won the Golden Globe for it. When Katharine Hepburn came to see it, and of course they all knew Miss H was in the audience that night and where she was sitting up in one of the boxes, on the curtain call, she stood up for my mother and then sat down again. My mother always loved that. But a couple of great stories about her. One in particular, a dear friend of mine, a guy named Dwayne Poole, was a wonderful writer, playwright, and also a television writer. And he wrote a number of movies for television, and some in later years starring Miss Hepburn. And they got to be very friendly. And so on the days off, Dwayne would call her and he'd say, "I'm bored, let's go to the movies." She said, well, so they looked around and couldn't find anything they wanted to see. So there was a revival house that was showing The Lion in Winter. And she said, "Oh, I've never seen it, let's go." I said, "You won the Oscar for it and you've never..." "No, I've never seen it, let's go." So it's about 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and there were maybe a dozen people in this movie theater. And Kate Hepburn is sitting there, and she's narrating the whole thing, saying, "Peter hated shooting this scene. He was freezing the entire time." And people are shushing her until they realize that it's Katharine Hepburn. And so she kept kind of narrating the whole film. So by the end of the film, everybody in the audience came and sat around them so they could her whole dialogue about the film, which was better than the film, than just watching the film itself. Another story about that Dwayne told me about her, which is there are no children here today. This one's slightly off color, but there are no children here today, so I think I can tell it safely. So another time they were on that same trip on location, she called him and said, "It's a gorgeous day, let's find a park and go for a walk." So Dwayne did some research and found a nearby park. And so they're having this lovely walk through the park on this beautiful day in Toronto. And Dwayne suddenly realizes they're in an area of the park where men are disappearing into the woods and, shall we say, assignations are taking place. So Dwayne's thinking, "Oh God, hopefully she won't notice. I'll just keep her talking. I'll just keep her occupied." And so he said, "So Kate, what about blah, 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 blah?" And so they're walking and talking and walking and talking. And finally she turns to him mid-sentence and says, "It's very cruisy here, isn't it?"
Did she really?
She really did. She really did. So in terms of those films she did in her later years, she did there was a rather famous one she did with Laurence Olivier called Love Among the Ruins. And it was the first time that the two of them had worked together and playing an elderly couple sort of discovering romance in their later years. And everyone was so shocked that the two of them had never worked together before. And I have a little, I'm going to kind of read part of this one because it's when there was a book, a wonderful book by A. Scott Berg called Kate Remembered. And he asked her what she thought about working with Sir Laurence Olivier. And I just want to get it right, so I'm just going to read this little bit, but of course I'll read it in her voice. So she said, "I enjoyed working with Larry. He was a first-rate actor, even if he was a second-rate person. Aside from the fact that he was a posturing egomaniac, I didn't care for the way he treated his first wife, Vivien Leigh. You see, Vivien and I were friends in Hollywood. She was a talented but deeply troubled woman. You see, Larry always wanted to be a big movie star, and while he was considered a great actor on the stage, he was never in the first rank as a star in the movies. Then Vivien comes along and gets cast as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Biggest picture ever made. Wins the Academy Award. Suddenly Larry comes along and says, 'Oh, darling, we really must get you out of Hollywood now. Let's go off and do Shakespeare together.' Now at that point, Vivien could do anything, but he was clearly trying to keep her in her place, which was build beneath him. Then a few years pass and Vivien returns to do A Streetcar Named Desire. Most talked about movie of the year. Wins the Academy Award. And suddenly Larry says, 'Oh, darling, we really must get you out of Hollywood now. Let's go off and do Shakespeare together.' Small man. Giant actor. Very small man."
Wow.
I wouldn't like Katharine Hepburn saying that about me.
No, no. You don't want Katharine Hepburn talking behind your back, that's for sure. But she does it in an eloquent way.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to have somebody diss you, it might as well be Katharine Hepburn.
Exactly, for sure.
I'm looking at who else is on my list here. Oh, here's a great kind of mom story as opposed to a celebrity story. So, pardon me, I studied acting at Juilliard. And just as I had finished the end of my first semester at Juilliard, and I was going home from my Thanksgiving break, my mother was doing a honeymooners reunion down in Atlantic City. They were shooting it live before a studio audience. And so my father drove me down to Atlantic City, and we were going to watch the live taping and have Thanksgiving dinner with Jackie Gleason and Art Carney and, you know, Jane Meadows and all of the regular suspects. So anyway, after a couple of months of studying Shakespeare and Ibsen and Chekhov, you know, I was very full of myself. And I'd studied with Edith Skinner, who was one of the greatest voice and speech teachers at the time. And so I was saying, "Well, Father, perhaps when I'm finished at Juilliard, I'll go for my master's degree." And I was just being so piss elegant. And my father, just who was such a lovely, gentle man, he just kind of bit his lip and didn't say anything. So we watched the Honeymooners reunions show, and needless to say, the Honeymooners style of acting was just a little different from what I was learning at Juilliard. And I was mugging and all of this over the top. I was horrified. So we went to dinner afterwards, and and I said, "Good God, Mama, how could you do such a piece of shit?" And she just glared at me over her shrimp cocktail and took a puff on her cigarette, and she said, "I know it's shit, and I know exactly what I'm doing. I am paying your tuition." So that shut me up like a clam.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she put you in your place, and rightly so.
Sometimes you got to pay the tuition, or the kids need braces, or whatever it is at the time.
Sure. You think and people did Love Vote because they wanted to?
Yeah, really.
You know? Yeah, college tuition was coming up for sure. Oh my gosh, Luke, these stories are so fantastic. You know, before I know we probably got a great one to end with, but does anybody have any questions for Luke, or anybody that they'd like to see if he has a story about? Raise your hand. Anybody?
Yes,
hey, Judy. Jude, go ahead and unmute yourself, dear.
Luke, Yankee, I am a diehard fan of yours, and I will be forever forevermore. I just found you, I think it was on a Facebook feed, and I thought, I'm gonna follow him, and I'm so glad I did.
I am too, Judy. You know, we correspond every now and then on Facebook. I know exactly who you are.
You're so kind to do that. You're very approachable. I'm just very thrilled to be here today.
Thrilled to have you here. And I saw you that I thought, oh, I think that's the Judy.
It is. I had a question. What did your mother have to say about filming The Bad Seed? Because that was a knock your socks off performance that she did. You know,
Colden. Colden's going crazy right there. You better have a story, Luke.
Yes, Colden's heard all my Bad Seed stories. You know, for those of you who may not be familiar, The Bad Seed was it was kind of the first of its kind in the mid-50s about this little girl who was a killer. And it was long before The Omen or you know, anything, or The Exorcist or anything else like that, way before. And my mother played the alcoholic mother of the little boy that my mother, that the little girl has killed. And the boy's name was Claude Daigle. And so my mother was, my brother Mark, who's my oldest brother, was about the same age in those days as Claude Daigle. I mean, he was around 10 or 12. And my mother was not that sort of method actress who had to feel everything internally, the way Marilyn was. But she started seeing my brother Mark's face as the face of Claude Daigle. And you know, no matter how hard she tried not to do that sort of substitution, as they call it in acting terms, Mark's face kept popping into her head as the face of her child who had been killed. And it had a profound effect on her. She started getting depressed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She was, you know, just staying in bed most of the day. And by the time she got to the theater, she was an absolute wreck. And it was one of the things that made her performance so strong. But finally, my father suggested that she go see a doctor. And it wasn't even a shrink. I mean, I think it was a GP, because this was in the era when shrinks were not, you know, not that prevalent. And so she went to see her GP, and he explained, who was a you know, very fatherly figure and someone she knew quite well. And so she explained what was going on, and he said, the answer is clear. You have to give up this play. And she said, well, I can't do that. This is a big hit show. It's a wonderful role. I've gotten these incredible reviews. And he said, you are asking me what to do to solve this problem you are having. And I'm telling you, the answer is that you have to give up this play. So it was one of the first times that she actually broke her contract and left the play before the end of her year's contract. And, but then when she did the film, obviously the whole experience of making a movie is much more concentrated. And of course she wanted to do the film. But so since it was only for a few days, she sort of, you know, just dealt with it as best she could for the film. But it was a very intense experience for her. And I don't think she ever had another experience on stage or in films that was quite like that.
Wow, that's a great question, Judy. Thank you for asking. That's a great, wow, I didn't know that at all, Luke. That's amazing. Anybody else?
Yeah, it was very, very hard on her emotionally.
I bet. Colden Lamb. Unmute yourself.
And then Drew.
I haven't gone that far in your book yet, but I was wondering if, and I'm sure you have them, but do you have any butterflies or free stories from Broadway or from the film?
Yes, I do.
Actually, that back. I'm so sorry. Could you have any, besides the one you have in your book, this is the actual question I want to ask, final answer. Do you have any family affair stories that weren't in your book or were in your book? Particularly that one about the audition you might want to share. I love that one.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Thank you for setting it up so well. So my mother she was terrified of doing musicals, and she wasn't really much of a singer, even though she could act a song. And so she did very few of them. And the whole concept of that number is out, learn this new one for tomorrow night, just scared her to death. But she did it, and ironically, the first musical she starred in on Broadway, the only musical she started on Broadway, was called A Family Affair, and it was about a big Jewish wedding. And it had the distinction of being the first show directed by Hal Prince. Needless to say, it's it's known for that, if nothing else. And so the female lead was the ingenue, rather. My mother was the lead, but the female lead, the young bride, was a wonderful actress named Rita Gardner, who had done the Fantastics on Broadway, originating the role of Louisa, and a lot of wonderful things. Just a marvelous actress, and a lovely person as well, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know in recent years. And so the musical director, a gentleman named Stanley Lebowski, who was a very prevalent musical director at the time, said they're having auditions for the understudy to Rita Gardner, and would you mind coming in? There's a particular girl I'd like you to see. And Mom's thinking, why would, I'm just looking at our time, Mom's thinking, why would I give a damn about the understudy to the ingenue? But, Stanley has nursed me through this. He's gotten me through all these numbers and ballads and everything. Sure, I'll do that for him. So this woman comes in, and she's very late, and comes in just, all disheveled and carrying all these shopping bags. And she says, oh, I'm terribly sorry that I'm late, but I'm opening the Rainbow Room next week, and I couldn't decide which shoes to buy, if I should wear the flats or the heels, and I have to take the other ones back by 6 o'clock. So what do you think? So she fishes in her bag and holds up these 2 shoes. And Mom said, dear, for the Rainbow Room, I think you'd be better off in the heels. Oh, thank you, Miss Hecken. Oh, I'm such a fan. So she goes through this whole elaborate routine. It's like, did you want to sing something for us, dear? So finally, she gets out her music after all this mishigas and all this drama, and she starts singing, and they hear this extraordinary voice. And after she leaves, Mom's like, she's for the understudy to the ingenue? My God, much as I love Rita Gardner, you should fire Rita Gardner and give her the part. What was that girl's name? And Stanley Lebowski looks down at the resume and says, her name is Barbara Streisand.
Oh my God!
She was cast as Miss Marmalstein, and I can get it for you wholesale, and walked away with the show, and the rest is history.
Cold in lamb. Wow. Thanks for leading us down that path. That was awesome.
Really? You had a question.
Yes. Going back to the bad seed, now the ending of the film is quite different from the ending of the play.
Terrible.
Did your mom have any words to say about how they had to do what they needed to do back in Hollywood back then?
Yes, thank you for that. The end, for those of you who've seen The Bad Seed, as I said, it's about this little girl who's a killer, and her mother realizes it, and it's and ultimately kills the little girl. And so in the play, the mother and then kills herself. In the play, the little girl lives and the mother dies. But of course, evil could not triumph over good in 1950s Hollywood. So they have this very, very tacky ending for the film where the mother is shot but somehow manages to live, and the little girl manages to, and then goes down, and she's still trying to get this penmanship medal. She's been trying to get the whole play. So she's out on a rainy night fishing in the water and gets struck by a bolt of lightning. And then they have this curtain call where they have the whole cast come out as if to say, this was only a story, this isn't true. And then Nancy Kelly, who plays the mother, at the very end of the curtain call, takes her over her knee and gives her a spanking. And it is the most corny, it's absolutely cringeworthy. It's so campy, and my mother absolutely hated it and thought it destroyed a lot of the integrity of the piece. But in 1950s Hollywood, with all of the codes about morality and such, that's what they felt they had to do.
Oh, man. That's a great question, Drew. Anybody else have anything you want to ask? Judy, do you have something else to say? Go ahead here.
I had one more. I was
Okay.
thoroughly enchanted and loved Miracle in the Rain with Jane Wyman. and Eileen Heckert. Can you tell me anything about that movie or what went on behind the scenes?
I do have a funny story about Miracle in the Rain. Miracle in the Rain was my mother's first film, and I believe it was 1952. And it was a World War II story, because this is shortly after the war. And basically, Mom plays the best friend to Jane Wyman, and Van Johnson is this soldier who she falls in love with. And it was just a really sappy love story. And the way Mom used to describe it, she'd say, first Van dies, and then Jane dies, and I'm left hanging on the altar at St. Patrick's. So, and there's this miracle that happens, and it's extremely corny. So, what was the story? Oh yes. So Mom was, needless to say, she was not a shrinking violet. And she was saying around the set, I mean, what a crappy script it was. And, oh, this is just such a soapy love story. And what a melodrama. Do you believe we're doing this really crappy script? So she was called into the office at, I'm not certain, but I believe it was Warner Brothers. So she was called into the office at Warner Brothers, and this gentleman sits behind the desk and very buttoned up with his glasses and you know, his hair all slicked back with brilliantine. And he said, now, Miss Heckert, you have been heard saying disparaging things about this film around the lot. What do you have to say for yourself? And she sort of hemmed and hawed and thought, oh, well, my career in Hollywood is over before it's even begun, and they're going to fire me. And she thought for a minute and looked at this man across the desk and said, well, what do you want me to say about this turkey? And he started laughing. He said, yeah, that's pretty terrible, isn't it? Just don't say it on the lot, okay, honey? Yeah, sure, but whatever you want. Yeah, you got it, no problem. So,
oh, wow.
And another brief story about Miracle in the Rain is that when they were filming that final scene in St. Patrick's Cathedral, it was the middle of the night. And so Mom went to one of the priests who was sort of, you know, in charge of overseeing the shooting. And she said, hey, Father, I need to go to the little girl's room. Well, the public restrooms are all closed at this hour of the day. Well, there's got to be somewhere I can go. So, well, there's only the priest's quarters, and no one's ever been in there. A woman has never been in there. She said, well, honey, there's going to be one tonight. So show me the way, because I got to pee. So she was one of the only women in St. Patrick's Cathedral in the priest's quarters to use the loo.
God love her. That's quite an accomplishment.
Indeed.
You know what? We have a few more minutes. Ron has a question in the chat, and he says, would you have any stories regarding Miss Heckert's experiences in her 1990 sitcom, The Five Mrs. Buchanans?
Wow.
Yeah.
The Five Mrs. Buchanans, it never, and God bless Mark Cherry, who is a dear friend of mine, but who created it, I mean, long before Desperate Housewives and all, it didn't really work because the premise of the show was kind of one note, because basically it was this man who had four ex-wives, and you know, how they didn't get along, the husband had died, and how they didn't get along with their bitchy mother-in-law. And, you know, there were only so many times that they could say awful things about their mother-in-law, and then she shows up at the door unexpectedly. So it was kind of a one-note show, but she had fun doing it, and with Harriet Harris and Judith Ivey, and just a wonderful, wonderful cast. I mean, the women were all extraordinary. But she did a number of sitcoms over the years and a number of episodic TV shows, and she kind of preferred doing the guest spots as opposed to doing the recurring roles, because that's a lot of work doing a show week after week, and wasn't really one of her favorite experiences, but she made it work as best she could.
As one does in a sinking sitcom, as one does. When you're a working actor, you're lucky to have the work and see if it hits, right? We don't know. Exactly. Luke, you know, you're such an amazing storyteller, and we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to visit with us today and give us these great stories. And to those of you from Maryland Mom and Me, thank you so much for sharing that experience, and we will all look forward to when we can all gather and see that in full. And if you ever get the opportunity, I'm telling you, run down to go see it. It's fantastic.
You can check out the website, marylandmomandme.com, or there's also information about it on my website, which is lukeyankee.com.
lukeyankee.com. Luke Yankee's all over. He's all over Instagram and Facebook. You just look up Luke Yankee on the internet, and just piles and piles and piles of stuff come up of how wonderful this man is. He's written many plays that produced all around the world and country right now. Like, you know, he wrote an amazing, and if you haven't seen it, but you're interested in anything having to do with Titanic, I highly suggest his show, The Last Lifeboat.
Thank you, Colden.
Which Colden just happens to have. You know what, Luke? We're gonna have to figure out a way to get him an autographed copy of that. I think that's just too. That was a baller move, Colden. That was a baller move. I'm impressed. He signed my book. Ha ha. So, listen. Before we go, I want to end on one story, one of my favorite stories with Luke. But before we go, I just again want to thank him. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this session of 3D+U. We will be back on Wednesday, and our schedules are posted on our Instagram, Facebook. We send out e-blasts, and it's also listed on our website. It is not required by any means, but if you feel so inclined, 3D Theatricals is a nonprofit organization. And if you would like to make a small donation, you could go to our website at 3dtheatricals.org and hit the donate button. Again, not required, but every little bit helps during this time until we come back.
And especially during this time, we need to support our local arts organizations. So I encourage you to do that if you're in a position to do so.
Thank you, Luke. Yes, I mean, all of us, we're all just trying to figure it out from day to day, what's going to happen. We plan to come back in the spring with Newsies. The exact dates we're still working out as we're working with the county and the city and all the levels of bureaucracy to find out who's in charge, who's on first, what's on second, and who's going to open when. That's what we're trying to find out. So when we have more information, we will definitely send that out to you. We can't wait to see you again. But Luke Yankee, you know, I would imagine if you're in Connecticut, it's certain in the 70s, 80s, that you could have probably run into a really big movie star somewhere like, oh, I don't know, ice cream shop?
Okay. I'll tell the short version because we're about out of time here.
Yeah.
So my parents were great friends with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. In fact, they met doing Picnic on Broadway. And Paul Newman was playing the supporting role of the rich boy next door because the producers didn't think he was handsome enough to play the leading man. So many years later, Paul Newman is doing a film in a sleepy little New England college town, and not unlike the one where I grew up. And there was this woman who was a huge Paul Newman fan. And it was a hot summer day, and there was a long line at the ice cream parlor out the door and around the block. And she was waiting all summer long to run into Paul Newman. And all of a sudden, she's in line at the ice cream parlor and realizes he's standing right behind her. And her heart skips a beat, and she's taking out her compact and looking at him to make a fool of herself. And she's saying to herself, okay, dear God, just let me get up to the counter and get my ice cream cone without making a fool of myself in front of Paul Newman. Please, 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 God. So she gets up to the counter and she orders her ice cream cone, and she gets outside, and she has to lean against the park bench because her knees are shaking so much. She's like, oh, thank God. What? Wait a minute. Where's my ice cream cone? Oh, I must have left it on the counter, and now I'm going to have to go back in there in front of Paul Newman, and it's going to be so embarrassing. And at that point, he sees her sort of looking around, looking kind of lost, and he comes out and he taps her on the shoulder and he says, pardon me, ma'am, put it in your handbag. And she was so nervous that she had taken her ice cream cone and paid for it and went, put it right into her purse. And so she opens her purse, and there's strawberry ice cream dripping all over her keys, her wallet, her book. And she just looks at this gooey mess in her purse and then looks up at Paul Newman, and he just smiles and tips his baseball cap and walks on his way.
Is that a great story or what? Is that just the greatest story to go out with? Can you imagine Paul Newman? Oh, dreamboat, dreamboat.
He was a lovely man, very kind, very down to earth, very humble.
You know, what an amazing life, you know, that your parents led, and what the fact that you grew up in such a family and in a time where you could be around these people and share. And so lucky are we that you get to share these stories with us. Luke, you were just fantastic. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all for being here. I'm honored and humbled and for your attention, and thank you so much.
Yes, well, listen, everybody feel free to unmute, say goodbye, thank you. I want you to have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. We hope that you stay healthy and happy, and that all good things come your way, but mostly good health.
Theatricals.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
joining.
Thank you, Luke.